On today's show, the UCP and the NDP agree. The preborn are human. The consequences from the COVID lockdown begin to emerge. Society continues to shift as we look at 3 stories you might have missed. And finally, the monster lives as we review the movie Victor Frankenstein. This is Penhold Talk Radio. And welcome back to the show. Thank you for joining us again this week. We appreciate you taking some time out to hang out with us. My name is Brian Constantine. I am here with my co-host, Michael Rowland.
Hello, hello.
And let me just start the show off with a little public health announcement. Stand a little bit further back from your phone or your listening device. I do have a little bit of a congestion, so I don't want to infect anyone else. Mask up at your own discretion if need be. But just a public health announcement there. For your betterment or for your benefit. We do have a sizable table between us, so I think
we're good.
You're good.
We're good.
You're good over there. Okay. All right. Enough of that. This week in Penhold, there's a few things happening that in the past, and a few things to kind of let you know going forward. Last weekend, the Jim Pendergast Celebration for Life was hosted at the Memorial Hall. And if you didn't get a chance, it looked like they had a great send-off, really, for Jim. Yeah. They had their ladder trucks set up on either side of Fleming Avenue with a huge Canadian flag strung across it. You can go to the Town of Penhold Facebook page to see pictures of it. And so that looked like it was, again, just a fitting tribute send-off to Mr. Pendergast. The other thing that went on is, so you might recall a couple months ago, the Town Council initiated the Mayor's Youth Award.
Right, yep.
And so we have our first inaugural winner of the Youth Award here in Penhold. And it went to Logan Windebank.
Nice. Congratulations.
Yeah. So again, there's pictures on the Facebook page there of the smiling winner and even bigger smiling mother and father.
Yeah. Proud parents.
Yeah. And thoroughly embarrassed on Facebook there from a glowing review from his mother on rightfully bragging on her son.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah.
We need that. So yeah, congratulations to Logan. Looks like he's well deserved. Yeah, I've heard that this was a pretty difficult decision for at least some counselors. Like I was speaking to one, or they mentioned it, that this might have been one of the harder decisions they had to make when deciding what to do as a council. Yeah, they make all sorts of different decisions that affect the town, but this was a hard one because apparently they had so many to choose from.
Well, that's good. That's awesome to see that in town. That many youth that are eligible for something like that.
Yeah. There are definitely enough youth out there in Penhold.
Yeah. But active youth that are involved. That's great.
Yep. Yeah. So shout out to Logan for winning the very first Mayor's Youth Award. So that was last week. This weekend, though, looks like Bolorama is in full swing, or at least full swing as far as its setup goes.
I saw the piles of dirt sitting there. I haven't looked in the last day or two, but I know I saw it driving by.
Yeah, as of this recording, which is a couple of days before it's released, and yeah, they got the dirt out. Looks like they got a few stands maybe starting to set up around there. I know they're sold out now.
Really? That's good. I know I kept hearing ads about it on the radio. 95.5, the country station, was giving away tickets and advertising where you could buy tickets. And so I don't know how many tickets went on sale, but that's good.
It still feels really small, kind of.
Oh, I know. I look at it and I don't know how it works, but
they've done this before, and I'm sure it doesn't take a bull much space to knock off the cowboy. So,
also doesn't take a bull much space to run through a crowd. But
yeah, not that it's gonna be dangerous. I'm sure all the safety precautions are in place.
I'm sure they know what they're doing. I just don't.
That's right. But nonetheless, it looks like it's gonna have a nice fun little crowd going on there this weekend.
Yep.
So yeah, if you got tickets, enjoy it. If you don't, you might want to avoid that area.
Yeah, stay away
around the Penhold Tavern there in their back lot. But that's what's going on around Penhold. So as we expand out to Alberta at large, just an update on the topics that we addressed last week. We talked about the topic of abortion, and part of that was highlighting that the NDP wanted to put in abortion into bereavement leave.
Yeah.
So the way this started was apparently the UCP put forward a bill that would have updated some labor law, and so it has a whole bunch of other things in there related to reserve. Yeah, so they're updating the Labor Statutes Amendment Act is what they're calling it. So updates to some employment codes. So reservist leave is another thing in there. They got other things I think related to schooling. Post-secondary bargaining process. But anyways, I won't bore you with that stuff. But the bereavement leave was what we touched on last week. Mm-hmm. And so this was actually put in place before the whole thing exploded down the States with the whole Roe v. Wade situation. And so the bereavement leave was put in place initially to allow the parents who have lost, who have experienced loss through a loss of pregnancy. And I think in the original language, it referenced specifically miscarriage and stillbirth.
Right.
And even when that first came up, the NDP wanted to know why abortion wasn't mentioned. And even, and so the whole Roe v. Wade in the States just kind of ramped up things. And even before getting to the most recent news, the UCP said that abortion would be covered under the law as it was originally written. So they already kind of thought it was there, even though it's not specifically mentioned. Right. And so when things did fire off down the States, the NDP pushed harder to get abortion specifically included into this amendment to allow for bereavement leave. And so the UCP has officially done so. They've amended the bill to allow parents to take bereavement leave for any reason. That would allow leave for in any pregnancy that doesn't end in a live birth. So if you're pregnant and it doesn't come to full term and a live birth, you can therefore have bereavement leave.
Right.
I think this is more about kind of protecting jobs. I don't know what kind of pay, if there's any pay required in this.
Under labor law, that would just be the requirement for employers to provide time off.
Yes. And so that's what they've done now. And so they've framed it in language. Let's see, with this amendment, the legislation will provide broadest approach possible to address any situation where pregnancy ends in other than a live birth, regardless of reason or timing for the end of pregnancy. And so they haven't specifically mentioned abortion in it. They've simply replaced the terms miscarriage and stillbirth with the phrase any pregnancy that ends in a result other than a live birth.
Yeah.
So they said it's always kind of meant to include abortion, but then this is just going to make it as broad and as possible. Of course, the NDP wants it specifically mentioned, but this is what I think is as far as they're going to get with it. And I find this interesting because, first of all, as we touched on before, this whole idea of bereavement of one who's bereaved. There's a grieving of a loss of a loved one.
Yeah, there's an attachment to another person that has been lost.
Yeah, and so this goes against first, I think, NDP's worldview overall. Like they just I don't see them recognizing the humanity of the unborn.
No, so yeah, to recognize the humanity, to identify that as a lost person would seem to go against their ideological position of being able to terminate the pregnancy because it is not yet a person. So,
Right.
so they're contradicting their own ideology by requesting this.
But see, they're just so hooked on this whole idea of we have to protect abortion and this whole reproductive health care thing.
Yeah.
And all the other euphemisms that go along with it, and they think that we had to put this in here because then it equates abortion and loss of pregnancy with all these other losses of pregnancy. But yeah, you're though implying the humanity of the unborn, or like I said, you're rewriting the whole definition of the word bereavement.
Yeah,
like there is no other term, there is no other definition for it. It's
Yeah.
always associated with the loss of a person.
yeah,
Like I said, at best you can get, say, a loss of a family pet or something like that, but this is not what's going on here.
no,
So many people on the left almost seem like they want to treat, a loss of pregnancy, or sorry, let's put it this way, they want to treat abortion really no different than taking out your appendix, but you don't
get bereavement.
grieve your appendix loss.
And your partner, your spouse, certainly doesn't get to take bereavement leave or any leave over you having your appendix removed.
Correct. Yeah. These are we're talking about different things, but what is the difference? Please tell me, people on the left.
If you're going to call it just a clump of cells that has no humanity, then what's the bereavement for?
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, it seems to go against the whole NDP worldview political perspective. And then for the UCP, and this really goes for almost any politician on the right and any politician who claims to be pro-life, they always frame it as personally pro-life, but they're never a pro-life politician when it comes to actually legislating. So this amendment would seem to kind of go against the whole UCP political pragmatism when it comes to the topic of abortion. There's a lot of UCP politicians that will claim to be pro-life, but there's no one remotely interested in, or I should say hardly anyone remotely interested in actually legislating anything that would suggest or that would kind of undermine or limit or restrict abortion in some way.
Right.
And yet this bill, again, would seem to imply the humanity of the unborn.
Yeah, it's kind of a subtle way of saying we believe that is equivalent to somebody losing a child in miscarriage.
Right. So I don't have the people on the left might be concerned, this could, if they want, they can claim that this is a way of shoehorning the humanity of the fetus into Canadian law.
Yeah. Because
it was only a few years ago, actually, when MP Kathy Wagentall tried to put forward a federal bill that would have criminalized injuring or killing a fetus in the womb.
Right. Yeah. So you harm or you attack a pregnant woman and the fetus dies, it can be treated as murder.
Correct. Now, but she tried to frame it in such a way that it would only count as murder if it was done to a pregnant woman who was intending to carry the child to term. Because what she wanted to avoid was she didn't want to criminalize abortion, but she wanted to criminalize killing a fetus. And there's a number of cases where, the pregnant woman has died in the 9th month, perhaps in like domestic violence situation. Yep. And the family of the lost woman are like, no, like that we know that we lost not only our daughter, but our granddaughter or something like that. Like this was two people that died here. Yeah. But under Canadian law, you don't actually become a person until you are fully separated from the body of the mother. Yeah. So even if you were killed in mid-birth, you would not be your death would not be classified a murder. Yeah. Under Canadian law. But the reason why that bill doesn't go through a few years ago, this federal one, is because the argument was it was opening the door, it was cracking the door open to recognizing the humanity of the unborn or the preborn, and so it didn't pass. This is interesting. Like I don't know. Is this a crack in the door? It's really interesting.
The closest we've seen to Canadian politicians going in that direction.
Yeah. And then, so this is what I mean. I'm not sure how I feel about this inclusion, because I don't, if you're going through abortion, and I'm thinking of it in the terms of just this kind of voluntary approach to killing your fetus. And if you're doing that, then I don't see why you would need to grieve that. You're probably already convinced, and you're trying to convince yourself that it's not a human being. But at the same time, I like perhaps the direction that this might be shining some light in.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting one. I'll be curious to see if pro-life groups start leveraging this bill.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to discount the fact that the humanity is recognized of the unborn or preborn. Now in some cases though, and this is where some of the pro-life organizations make a good point, is that a lot of abortions are done out of pressure and coercion from, say,
Right.
the boyfriend or a family or something, family members, and so they go through an abortion, but they really don't want to. And in some cases, they wanted the child, but the pressures around them coercively pushed them in towards that.
Yeah.
And so I can see grief being an issue there.
Yes.
Sure. And so, sure, I have no problem with that. And then the last one, as you mentioned already, is that this includes all parents.
Yeah. As a bereavement leave, the father can take that bereavement leave as well.
Yeah. And when it comes to abortion, the father has absolutely no say, especially in Canada. There's no say in whether or not the abortion takes place. And so here, there's recognition that a loss of a child that was in the woman is actually impacting and connected with the father.
There is some kind of a tie there, some kind of a loss to the father as well.
Yeah. So it's a very interesting inclusion into law. I don't know if I'll have to look and see if there's other provinces like this. But like I said, this was a fairly recent update, prompted before all the stuff in the States. And so,
yeah, it's not a reaction to the Roe v. Wade
not
stuff.
initially, at least.
At least it got some attention because of it.
Yeah. Oh, it's a very, very interesting connection or direction. See where that precedent might lead. But hard to discount some of the significant implications that are already in that bill. Now in other news, there's a couple stories that I want to bring out. So as we've kind of come out of the COVID lockdown, and these past 2 years of restrictions, there's more and more data starting to emerge about how those 2 years and those significant lockdowns have impacted basically the world population.
Yeah, so not looking at the COVID health part itself, but the response to COVID and how that impacted people.
Yeah, and it's not so much what the disease of COVID is doing, but what the health impacts of just the lockdowns have really caused. So I just want to highlight these. There's a recent significant uptick in hepatitis cases in kids, which is peculiar.
How does that happen?
That's the good question, because there's 348 worldwide cases of hepatitis in kids due to unknown causes. Doesn't seem like a lot, but these are cases that are now in UK, Spain, Israel, the US, Denmark, Ireland, Netherlands, Italy, Norway, France, Canada, and even over in Japan. So this isn't just one locality. This is worldwide. And usually worldwide, you see about 20 to 25 cases of unknown cause hepatitis in kids. So
as small as that number is, that is a massive uptick.
It seems like it's an indication of something. And these aren't many of these cases are go about and are these unexplained cases are actually resolve themselves unexpectedly, because we don't know the cause. So they're just kind of treating the symptoms, and they kind of resolve themselves unexpectedly on the other end. But there's at least 17 kids that have had to have liver transplants because of this.
Oh man.
So yeah, it's really the health authorities are really curious about what's going on here. So there's it says in one article, it says current investigations suggest a link to an adenovirus, according to WHO and ECDC. Not the band. This is another health organization. Adenoviruses can spread from person to person, causing a range of illnesses, including colds, pink eye, and gastroenteritis. So this is an adenovirus is actually a very common one.
Yeah,
This is something that's passed around, causing a large range of common sicknesses and colds. Who knows what I got, but maybe. But here's the other theory that this article also mentioned. It says another theory being considered is that children's immune systems weakened during pandemic lockdowns and distancing may be more vulnerable to diseases.
that I believe. Like, now only anecdotal, but like I know my own kids seem to get sick way more easily right now, and I've heard the same story from numerous other people, especially those young kids who have had less lifetime exposure. We just locked them out of society for a pretty near 2-year period and then throw them back out. As soon as those minor viruses and stuff hit them, their body doesn't know what to do. It seems like it is happening. Now, anecdotally, you can take that for what it's worth, but it wouldn't surprise me if studies do verify that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has to be something that would seem to be have an effect on a wide scale. Like, look at those countries I just rattled off. Like,
yeah, this isn't one region.
No, this is a worldwide thing, and so it's hard to say, something's in the water over here kind of idea. This is
across oceans.
Seems to be connected to something that's had a wide impact, and the fact that we've locked kids and isolated kids from gathering these normal connections from their interactions with other kids, all of a sudden you let them back out and they get hit with a ton of viruses that maybe they just haven't been kind of slowly accumulated over time.
Yep.
Like there's reason there's a certain amount of common sense to this research. Like I said, this is still the health authorities don't know. This is just the theories that they're looking into, and so it's worth thinking about. The other one, and this has come out in other studies as well, is that we're seeing excess death in young adults over these last 2 years. And what this term excess death means is it refers to kind of the number of deaths above average for a certain time frame. So basically they look at say the years 2015 to 2019, find the average amount of deaths, and then you look at 2020 and you all of a sudden see a spike. Anything above, say, that 4-year average or 5-year average would be considered excess death.
Yeah.
And it would be something that you would want to investigate. Like, why did all of a sudden this go up like this?
Yeah.
And so we see a lot of excess death, obviously, over these last 2 years. And in this study that's come out, and this is from the Alberta health authorities, actually, the health services have compiled this report. That says over those 17 months, and they're looking at the window from January 2020 to May 2021. It says 2,226 Albertans died of COVID-19, representing about 54% of the 4,214 excess deaths in the province over that time. And younger Albertans made up a large share of those deaths. So excess deaths in that 17-month window was about 4,200 people. That's above average.
That still leaves 2,000 above COVID.
Yeah, so COVID counts for about 2,200 that. So you have another 2,000 on top of that, above what would have normally been the average.
That's substantial.
Yeah, and it's deaths caused, and like the article mentions, it's made up disproportionately of younger people. And relates to all sorts of causes. The study looks at all different kinds of reasons for why the younger population died during this. Things like opioid was a big one.
Yeah.
Other ones were, say, lack of access to healthcare.
Yeah, there was a lot of people just not getting the health attention that they otherwise would have, either by choice or by lack of availability.
Yeah. So yeah, it pushed, and then the effects of these, both of kind of the effects of the lockdown themselves, and then the effects of the pressure on the healthcare system, all kind of conspired to bring about these other excess deaths that are much harder to count in real time. You just can't really.
Yeah.
And so this has always been kind of the danger about when you put on these mass scale restrictions like you do. You have to be aware that you're going to be causing collateral damage somewhere, or collateral effects,
and you're not going to know that until well on into it or after it. So you can't collect that data until later. So you're having detrimental effects without knowing exactly how bad that's going to be.
And and then so the idea of collecting this data is hopefully to use it to influence policy decisions next time
going
around.
Forward, yeah.
Like from my 2 cents, it seemed like this was a disease primarily targeting and impacting the older generation, the health compromised population.
Yeah.
And yet everyone was shut down.
Yeah.
Maybe this should get us to rethink maybe more targeted approach when the next pandemic comes around.
Yeah.
Because the young population in the excess death, this hepatitis thing going on with kids, these are interesting things that we think, in reviewing what's happened over these last 2 years, we need to factor into the decision making going forward. We can't dismiss these last 2 years and just move on. We have to learn from these last 2 years in order to approach the next one with perhaps wiser hands and policy decisions. But yeah, those are at least two recent stories that have come out over this last week that I think worth bringing to your attention. Now we got a series of. Normally we try to go through a little bit of a couple of smaller stories and then kind of a bigger topic to discuss. I got 3 other stories here, and I really don't know how to classify them, but they seem like big stories that have kind of might have easily to slide by.
Yeah, kind of went under the radar for a lot of people.
Yeah, these are things that if you could let them slide, but I wonder if you do, what kind of ripple effects down the road might be caused if we don't pay attention now.
Yeah.
So the first one that's come out is that, and this kind of connects back to the COVID era, let's call it the COVID era, is that the government really was mass tracking Canadian cell phones. Like there's one story that came out around the end of the year, and a recent one, as I think a committee is kind of looking at some of these issues. One story in December mentioned that 33 million Canadian cell phones were tracked.
Yeah.
And then a more recent one came out this last week, and it says from the National Post that Canadians' movements, including trips to the liquor store and pharmacy, were closely tracked via their mobile phones without their knowledge during the COVID-19 pandemic, a report sent to the parliamentary committee shows.
Yeah, and this wasn't just, people were concerned about the possibility of tracking with the apps, those apps that were designed to facilitate tracking of
close
contacts and stuff like that. This wasn't that. This was the government using your cell signal to cell towers to track the movement of people. They claim not individuals, but tracking just cell connectivity and knowing where people are located at what times and where crowds are occurring and so on.
Yeah. The other parts of the article mention that the report reveals the agency was able to view a detailed. So the agency here that they're referring to is the Public Health Agency of Canada,
right?
So the PHAC. So this is the Federal Health Service getting this report. So they're able to view a detailed snapshot of people's behavior, including visits to the grocery store, gatherings with family and friends, time spent at home, and trips to other towns and provinces. Later on, the phone locations allowed the agency to get a picture of gatherings occurring in people's houses, such as over Labor Day weekend. The report included a graph recording hours spent away from home in each province between Christmas 2020 to the week of September 19th, 2021.
Yeah. So you think like we all carry our phone in our pocket or on us all the time, and they can just monitor that there's a cluster of these phones all in one location. So they'll see your family gathering over Christmas and see that you are all clustered together in this home because that's where there's a big group of cell phones with signals connecting to the local tower.
Yeah, I'm looking for some of their reassuring language here. Okay. So from another article, it says in March, the agency, again, the Public Health Agency of Canada, awarded a contract to the Tell Us Data for Good program to provide de-identified and aggregated data of movement trends in Canada. So don't worry, the information is anonymized.
I've never found that a comforting thing. You see that all the time in anything that tracks your information. You'll see it on every app you install that'll say that the information is anonymized or it's not personally identifying you. It's not comforting though.
How hard would it be though? Like, because they're saying that they could identify the number of people in people's houses. Basically, they said they get a picture of gatherings occurring in people's houses, such as over Labor Day weekend. So, they could tell you that there was 5 cell phones in grandma's house.
Yeah. They can come to your door and say, we know that there was 12 people in this home yesterday. And we have the information.
Yeah.
It doesn't even matter if it's anonymized or not, whose cell phone it was.
Seems pretty easy just to track down a reasonable guess of who that cell phone belonged to.
Yeah.
It's this should be a little alarming. Now, like I said, they say it's anonymized data, and as far as that goes, yes, it is. It's not like they're connecting phone numbers and addresses and that kind of thing to this kind of information. It just says a cell phone signal was here.
Yeah.
But of course, you can just track that cell phone signal wherever it goes. It's hard to say it's completely anonymized. But here's the other thing is you're seeing this other kind of language. Not only are they reassuring you that it's that's de-identified, so it's not going to be directly connected to you. But you get other statements like this. And so this is from Blue Dot CEO. Blue Dot is apparently one of these companies that kind of aggregates and the cell phone data and puts it into shares that then. So there's kind of a go between.
Yeah.
You got the cell phone providers. They provide information that to this other group that kind of cleans it up and provides that data then to, I think, the agency. I think that's how, if you will, the chain of command goes.
Yeah, generally.
But this Blue Dot is one of these in between companies. The CEO Cameron Khan said Blue Dot has no interest in the movements or lifestyles of individuals, and here's the quote: "Our only goal is to help protect lives and livelihoods from infectious diseases, which requires intelligence about overall trends in population." And you'll see the same kind of language from the health agency as well. We're just doing this basically to understand how things are working, for your safety kind of response.
For your safety can go a long way in a very dangerous direction.
That's what I mean. So they don't know who you are, but they have all this information. It's not like they're just curious about what happened. They want this information to therefore make decisions ahead of time. So if they know that when they put out a health, a movement restrictions, you can't cross this border over this time frame, and lo and behold, movement was happening. What are they going to do? They're going to say, "Oh shoot, No, they're going to adjust their policy plans and say, okay, next time, in order to make sure people don't make sure people follow this restriction, we're going to have to do this now to stop them.
Yeah.
Or to make sure they follow along. So this can really, like I said, this isn't just data for curiosity's sake. This is data to facilitate future policies. And so, if you went to grandma's house over Christmas and you broke the health restrictions for when doing that, well, okay, is the government just going to say, "Oh, shoot, I guess that didn't work"? No, they're going to use this data to say
what would work better.
Yeah, how can we stop that from happening? Whether it's in our language or enforcement or different kind of policy decisions. This isn't just static information. This is going to be used for future use. Yeah. So yeah, so you kind of got two avenues there that might be concerning when you think about government. Is first them just kind of tracking you, period.
Yeah,
and then what are they going to do with that information regarding future policy? The last thing I think the third element that should be concerning here, it says again from the National Post article, it says that the committee on Wednesday released a report on its overall probe into the agency's collection of phone data during the pandemic. It concluded the government should tell Canadians if it collects data about their movements and allow them to opt out. First of all, yes, you should be telling them if you're tracking it. This is we see this opt out thing though, as if to me it's the assumption that the government has the right to it.
Yeah,
like why you should have to require me to opt in.
Yeah,
to me it's a huge difference.
Yeah,
it might not seem significant, but how many people are just kind of aren't even going to know that this is going on, and they're just going to be tracked, but you have to actually physically say, yes, I want the government to track me here, click.
Yeah.
As opposed to somehow the government saying, you really want to give up this information? Like we're doing it for the benefit of health and safety issues.
Yeah.
It's this whole opt-out thing versus opt-in. Opt-out just implies that they have kind of a presumptive right to it.
Yeah.
And then they just kind of justify it further by this is just for everyone's health and safety. But it's this, to me, it just seems more like an assumption of government overreach. Like I don't see, even though I think the government has a role to play in kind of the health and protection, let's put it this way, in the safety and protection of its citizens, that's not a blanket coverage, because I think you start to see where that goes. This is where restrictions come into importance, is that the government has I think a right to or has a responsibility to kind of protect its citizens in many ways, but that's also in respect to what citizens are allowed to do. The citizens have certain authority, to go to grandma's house and not have the government peeking over your shoulders. That's not where the government should be stepping in. Yeah. So yeah, this is another area where the government just assumes it can collect this data, and you can just say, no, I don't want you to do that. Why not flip it around? Why not flip it around? Because people aren't going to let you do it.
Yeah, they know that nobody would sign up for it, but just the fact that we've become so complacent and so compliant, and so accustomed to the convenience of things like our cell phones and everything else, that we say, well, to give that up might be an inconvenience for me. Well, whatever, the government tracks me. I've got nothing to hide. Yeah. And we just don't bother. Yeah. We just let them do it. And like, this to me sounds like going back to what happened in the days of Edward Snowden, when he did his big leak of information in the States, because it was exactly that. The government was collecting data without the populace knowing. Yeah. They were collecting absurd amounts of data on the individuals, not just the criminals. Like, the idea was that you can track a terrorist, but they were tracking everybody. And that's what we're doing here now. We're seeing the government just tracking the individuals, not specifically individualized data, but they're tracking everybody. Yeah. They're just doing blanket coverage of everybody without telling people they're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's scary.
It is. And it's all done under this ostensible explanation of this is for your own good.
Yep. They use that guise of, we're just doing this for your protection, for your safety, for the public health, the public benefit.
Yeah. But how far does that for your health, for your safety, for your protection go?
Yeah.
Like, what's the limiting principle here? And the government, like, this is what I'm talking about. Like, what's the rippling effect of this? Like, this might not seem like a big deal. I think it is, but you say the government just has permission to track your phone without you really knowing about it. And they just say, yeah, how about next time you allow us to, we should let you know and you can decide. We'll let you. It doesn't seem like a convincing response to me when it comes to this issue. And yeah, how far down, what does this look down like in the future?
Yeah.
How much further does the government think it can go under these reasonings? And just use of technology, kind of shadowy use of technology.
Yeah.
Reminds me of, like, was it the Batman Dark Knight movie?
Right, where he uses all the cell phones like a sonar system
Yeah,
and
right.
basically maps the entire city.
But yeah, if there's no limiting principle and it's just for your safety, well, we'll just watch you all the time and we'll make sure nothing happens to you.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't really feel too comfortable with that. Yeah, I don't need the government tucking me in that bed.
And it's not just about having something to hide. It's about your own rights and freedoms, and
that's right.
Where the government does and does not have authority.
Yeah, that's the balancing. The individual has a responsibility to protect himself. The government doesn't have that job full time. The police are there. That's good, but it's we don't need, like, the police are following us throughout our daily commutes or something like that, just to say, oh, we're just here to protect you. No, part of protection is me as a human being and an individual, looking after myself, looking after my family. Like, part of our protection is our own efforts, our own work to do that. Whereas the government says, no, don't worry about anything. We got you all covered all the time. Yeah. Like I said, be careful about that ripple. Yeah, that might be a tsunami you don't want to see coming over the horizon. All right, so that's the government. There's another really interesting story of kind of the military side of things. So there is a report that was commissioned by the government to look at issues of diversity and inclusion in the military.
Of course there was.
Yeah. And yeah, well, there is some reason. You've seen how many, was it not minister? Yeah, well, we've lost one minister of defense. We just recently have a new one, but there was I forget the title he has, but I think we went through like 2 or 3 of them in rapid succession because of sexual sexual abuse, might use strong harassment allegations. But anyways, so they convened this panel, and they recently came out with a report. And so it says that this report is titled Minister of National Defense Advisory Panel on Systemic Racism and Discrimination, with a focus on anti-Indigenous and anti-Black racism, LGBTQ2 prejudice, gender bias, and white supremacy. So it's a mouthful.
Yeah, no kidding.
And so, as you see, just by the title, it fits in perfectly with our cultural state, as it looks for all these systemic issues. And really, that's what's going on here. This is more systemic than say picking out individual cases. So here's just kind of a blanket statement. I don't think you'll have any problem gathering people to your side if you can point to an incident and say, this is racism. This is an example of sexual discrimination. Join with me in fighting against that.
Yeah.
You'll get everybody. You'll get most of people on your side because you're looking at a specific incident.
Yeah.
What I have a problem though is you start looking at these systems, these huge conglomerate organizations and filled with rules, and you say all these rules are built on these kind of colonial mindsets and rule outs and just kind of these built-in barriers to it. it's really hard to say for sure that that's what's going on there, especially when you can point to loads of counterexamples that that bias isn't going on.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's just kind of a blanket statement on that. So you can read through the report. It's about 120 pages. There's one point here that I want to highlight. And it's a kind of interesting one. It's under the title Redefining Chaplaincy. And so the first paragraph talks about, how it kind of recognizes the importance of chaplains to kind of fill the need, or the spiritual needs and religious needs of people in the armed forces. But remember, this is a report to root out all that systemic racism and bias and lack of diversity. So this is not surprising in that context. I'm quite frankly surprised this hasn't come out more prevalently in a lot of different areas regarding religion. But it starts to make the case, though, that religion or chaplains of particular mainstream religions should not be in the military. So it makes a couple of points here. It says another point. So it says that another important point is that at present, some chaplains represent or are affiliated with organized religions whose beliefs are not synonymous with those of a religious and inclusive workplace. Some of the
diverse and inclusive workplace.
Diverse and inclusive. What did I say? Anyways. Diverse and inclusive. This is why I have co-host, the proofread for me. Some of the affiliated religions of those chaplains do not subscribe to an open attitude and the promotion of diversity. So, for example, it says some churches' exclusion of women from their priesthoods violates principles of equality and social justice, as do sexist notions embedded in their religious dogmas. In addition, certain faiths have strict tenets requiring conversions of those they deem to be, quote, pagan, or who belong to polytheistic religions. Those faiths' dogmas and practices conflict with the commitment of the defense team to value equality and inclusivity at every level of the workplace. So let me first of all say, yes, they are highlighting an internal conflict here.
Yeah.
If this is your principle, to be equal and inclusive across the board,
then really all religions are kind of out
to an extent,
for the most part.
Yeah, but here, and so this is kind of interesting because I see this seems to be kind of arguing that there's certain religions that hold these kind of outdated sexist perspectives, and they don't meet up with our new cultural perspectives here.
Yeah.
And it's almost like we have the religious people over here and we have the kind of enlightened secularist over here, and we need to update everyone to get over to here. But really, it's two religions. Here we have a religion that says, women can't be priests. And over here we have a religion that says everyone is equal and inclusive, or everyone is equal in every respect.
Right. Yeah.
These are two views of the world, of reality.
Yeah.
And they're just assuming that because this religion over here doesn't meet up with us, doesn't meet our theological test, that therefore you have to get rid of it. We're not arguing about religion and non-religion, or religion and secularism over here. This is two competing views of religious, or two competing views of reality and how one sees it.
Yeah.
But here it's being set up as, here we have the big bad exclusionary guys over here, and we're all of this, everyone's over here in the big happy family, and you can't have them and them at the same time.
Yeah.
The report goes on to say that if the defense team rejects gender discrimination, anti-Indigenous discrimination, racialized discrimination in every other area, and is working hard to remove systemic barriers to the employment of marginalized people, it cannot justify hiring representatives of organizations who marginalize certain people or categorically refuse them a position of leadership. So they're saying that this advisory panel is recommending that the military no longer hires Christian chaplains, Jewish chaplains. If you want to distinguish between Christian and Catholic chaplains, Islamic imams, like there's a lot. Like you basically get rid of the big three.
Yeah.
And then who knows how much further they go in here. But this is just they say that you want to get rid of all this discrimination, but they use discrimination themselves to say cut it off here.
Yeah.
So again, we're not talking about whether or not discrimination itself is bad or good, but what are the rules that we are using in order to discriminate? What are the rules, or what's the way we are seeing reality and want reality formed, so to speak, in the military? And they're saying, well, you want to get rid of all these. That is part of all these religious groups over here, and therefore we can't have them in the military.
Yeah,
and this is when you're. I'm struggling to articulate how foreign and backwards this is. Many of these religions that the military would want to get rid of. Well, first of all, I would suspect that, and this is I don't have the data, but I probably wouldn't be hard to find that many, if not most, soldiers are religious in some way. It just seems to line up.
Yeah,
that happens, and so all those Christians, all those Muslim soldiers, they aren't allowed to have access to a Muslim chaplain or a Christian chaplain in the military if this was to go through.
Yeah,
that just seems so bizarre, and even more is it does, I think, toss out or try to get rid of religions and their values that have been fundamental to get society to this point. Like to deny that is to show your historical ignorance in the formation of this country and the West in general.
Yeah, the foundations of the society you're going out there to fight for, you are blatantly trying to reject at the same time. Yeah.
The reason you have the freedom to reject Christianity
is because of Christianity.
These Judeo-Christian values is largely because of the development according to Judeo-Christian values.
Yeah,
it's this again. This is where kind of going back to the whole government overreach. Part of the restriction on government is recognizing the power of the individual and the authority the individual has, the rights the individual has.
Yeah.
And if you don't recognize what the individual has, well, then government can just walk all over you. And that's what, kings and lords used to do all the time, is because the peasant, who is he? But once you started to recognize the humanity, the image of God in each human being, that itself automatically started putting restrictions on the king. It started putting restrictions on government overall.
Yeah.
And it's from that foundation that you can now say, I am this person. I am an LGBTQ person, and I want to get rid of now these kind of backwards Christian people over here. Those values, though, like you're getting rid of the foundations by which you are fighting against the other people.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's like I said. This is just a drop in the pond. I'm concerned about the ripple effects, and this is. You could argue that this itself is an extent of a ripple from something else a long time ago already. Now, it's worth noting at this point, though, that the government has kind of rejected at least this recommendation, at least at this time. It says Daniel Midden, Anand's press secretary. So Anand is the minister of, I think her name is Anita Anand. She's the minister of defense. So her press secretary came out and said chaplains would be an ongoing part of the military. And then, quote, for many decades, chaplains from a wide range of faiths have served the members of the Canadian Armed Forces and will continue to do so in the years to come, he said in an email. Minister Anand believes the chaplaincy should represent Canada's diversity, uphold the values and principles of the military, and provide CAF members with access to spiritual or religious guidance if they seek it, regardless of their faith. So it's good. It's the one caveat though in there is it says that Minister Nunn believes the chaplaincy should represent Canada's diversity. Okay, yep, there are actually Christians still in Canada, Christian soldiers even. But here it says uphold the values and principles of the military. The report was going on the basis that the military is moving towards this inclusive equality basis of things.
Yeah.
There's a dissonance there that I wonder how it gets resolved in the future. So yeah, there's, like I said, this is not religion versus non-religion. These are two competing views of reality clashing, and it's just one is in kind of the cultural limelight now.
Yeah,
and using that cultural power to push down on other people and other views of reality at this point. So yeah, that's the second thing. Second big topic that I think probably have slid by the radar of a lot of people, but yeah, and so that's just the military. Like I said, you see some of this already in just kind of off the top of my head. You know, it was just 2 years ago, I think, when the Canadian government refused to put out summer grants for pro-life organizations.
Yep.
Same kind of idea, where you're refusing to do so because you don't like that view.
Yeah.
So the discrimination is going on. It's where is that? What are you using as your rule for discrimination? Because whenever you're discriminating, you're saying that this is good and this is bad, or this is preferable, this is not preferable, and you're making that distinction with a higher standard by which you're applying to that situation. So whenever discrimination is in place, you have to ask, okay, by what standard am I discriminating in this situation? Because that's what's going on here.
Yeah.
So it's not discrimination itself that's the issue. It's by what standard are we using when we do discriminate? And in this case, it's this whole cultural buzzwords of diversity, inclusivity, and equality. We're seeing that in the military. We're seeing it in government policy continually. And then the last one, again, this is another topic that really we could do a whole big topic on.
Yeah.
Is the idea, or is the increasing expansion of euthanasia. Now this goes by a whole bunch of different euphemisms. Kind of euthanasia itself means good death, which is kind of an oxymoron, at least as it's usually used, especially when it's used as far as humans go. This is, I like to refer to it as assisted suicide, because that's what it is. But the kind of the common nomenclature, what you'll see in all the government and newspaper articles, is medical assistance in dying. So that's the term of art that they've kind of adopted.
That just sounds so weird when you actually say it out. Assistance in dying.
Medical assistance.
We can apply, take away the medical and we can apply it to a murder. It was just assistance in dying.
That's right. It goes back to that whole end of pregnancy kind of idea, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just bizarre to just call it assistance in dying. Assisted suicide. It's the choice to die, suicide. Assisted, you could call it medically assisted suicide if you want, because that's accurate. But
yeah, they really shy away from suicide. The term, you will not see that. It's very similar to the whole way where it's either pro-life or anti-abortion kind of thing, or you'll never hear pro-abortion. It'll be pro-choice.
Pro-choice, yeah.
So it's the same kind of use of language here to obscure what is really going on. So what this started all back in 2014 in Quebec, and then it's been expanded throughout Canada since then. That the Supreme Court found that you have a right to when your life will end, essentially. And initially, when the law was first passed on the federal level, it was restricted to people in terminal situations, in which case pain management, I think, had kind of been proven unhelpful.
Yeah.
And then the big term, though, was that their death was reasonably foreseeable.
Yes.
And so, you could be in severe pain, but you didn't have a terminal disease, or at least, your death was not imminent. And so in that case, you wouldn't qualify for assisted suicide. And though, as again, that restriction, reasonably foreseeable death, got tossed out again in Quebec, and then the Liberal government said, okay, well, we now got to rewrite it. And so they've really liberalized the whole.
And it did not take long. It happened pretty fast.
Yeah, like this. Yeah, just in 2014, that's when it all started. But I forget the time frame of when it became. I think it's 2016. Sounds about right. Something like that. 2015, 2016. 15 is when the Liberal government first was elected. Right. So it'd be somewhere around there. But now it's expanded beyond that. And so again, from a National Post, it says, in less than a decade, Canada's Medical Assistance in Dying program has expanded from a system limited solely to those with terminal illnesses to one that is now used by people who lack adequate housing. And it will soon be available to those with mental illnesses such as depression, bipolar disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Parliament should put the brakes on this runaway sled and fix the current system. So what they're referring to is that CTV has ran a couple articles in this last couple weeks about two people in very similar circumstances. One that they've named Sophia, a 51-year-old Toronto woman, and one that they've named another Toronto woman, Denise. And they both suffered from chemical sensitivities, in which case, smells related to chemicals used, say, in cleaning products, or even cigarette smoke or marijuana smoke. This would cause them quite a bit of distress. And I think in one article, the lady talks about how she feels basically she was trapped in her room for the last 2 years. Vents covered and filters in place and that kind of thing. Just try to get by the day by day.
Certainly a difficult situation. You can't minimize that. It's a hard life trying to live that way.
Yeah, I can't imagine it, given how many smells are out there and what and how many chemicals are now used. If your body is particularly sensitive to it, no doubt it can be a miserable existence. Now, both of these people tried, seems like, numerous ways and avenues to try to get living arrangements that would help alleviate their situation, but neither of them have done so. Sophia, after failing to find a new place, requested assisted suicide, or MAID, and went through with it. As the article says, she was granted state-sanctioned assisted death. And then the other lady, the 31-year-old Denise, again, she hasn't been able to find proper living conditions. And she's quoted in the article as saying, I've applied for MAID essentially because of abject poverty. So she's going through all these different organizations and government bureaucracies to try to find a suitable living arrangement, and she can't. And so now she feels she's got to the point where she just wants to end it. It's just, let's be done with this.
Yeah.
So in response to these two examples, the National Post themselves are of the opinion that says whatever gloss about a dignified death advocates want to use to justify MAID, these are people suffering most of all from poverty. Euthanizing the poor can't be what the Liberals who supported physician-assisted death had in mind. How much more common will cases like this be when MAID is extended to those with mental illness who are disproportionately poor?
Yeah, this isn't a solution to poverty. This isn't how we deal with poorly managed programs and services for those who are in a situation of desperate poverty. You don't just allow them to go ahead with medically assisted suicide.
Yeah, as I said, I have to give them the benefit of the doubt. I don't think those who are in favor of assisted suicide thought it was going to this place where kind of poverty becomes kind of the linchpin. Like, obviously, it's not just poverty. It's poverty that's compounding one's ability to relieve themselves of health issues. But what does that say about our assisted suicide laws that says that you can go through with this if you've got to the point where you are so poor you can't alleviate your health situation?
Yeah, when you take out things like that reasonably foreseeable death, you've now just opened it up to almost anything. It really just opens it up so that in a case like these ones where it is a horrible life, but they're not going to die from it in the foreseeable future, that it makes it possible for them to go that path.
And it's in, I think anyone who read the initial decision, especially after the reasonable, even actually when there's in the first case, I think it's called Carter v. Canada or something like that, is the Carter decision. And you can look it up, and when you read through it, even though they try to put these certain limits on it, this whole reasonably foreseeable death, the decision, the court itself found they found that this is a right that Canadians have. But if it's a right that Canadians have, on what principles then does government come in and say
you can or can't?
Yeah, so it's like, this might be one where they try to argue a Section 1 situation, where this on ideas that this is not good for a free and democratic society. You have people going through with assisted suicide.
Yeah.
And as it spirals downward, it seems where more and more it becomes easier and easier to access this. You might have a stronger and stronger case that this might not be good for society.
Yeah.
Maybe they can go that route. But even in the decision, you can see that there was nothing inherently limiting to that right.
Yeah.
If it is a human right, then it's yours, and the government has to go a long ways to kind of infringe upon that right. And we've kind of made that case in other episodes. But this is the problem here. It's not surprising for me that it's kind of moved in this direction. Why can't anybody just, if they decide to on the whim, go get it? Like, it's your right.
Yeah.
If that's if that's how they've defined this whole right to life, is you get to determine how you live and how you die. Where does the government get a say in it?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is, and then so the mental illness inclusion looks like it's going to be coming in about a year's time, and then I have to look, because I know there's, even when this first came in around 2015-16, there's already early talk on including, quote, mature minors. So these are kids that tragically are going through just terrible diseases. That would they not qualify for this? Like, there's one thing to say, yeah, maybe that 75-year-old who's has terminal cancer and the pain medications aren't working, we'll allow her to go through it. It's another thing to say that about, say, the 13-year-old.
Yeah.
Or at least that's how most of society still reacts about it.
Yeah. But
it's becoming more and more common to just say this is part of society now. So yeah, it's these three stories really, I think it just seems like these are touching on fundamental issues in some way that can have, and then whenever you're messing with the foundation, it has ripple effects, depending on what metaphor you want. If you want to go with the ripple effects, or if you're messing with the foundation of a building, it's going to affect things further down the line or up the structure.
Yeah.
And so these three stories on kind of the government overreach, the kind of dismissal of these foundational values in with the chaplaincies, and then with euthanasia and just the kind of the increasing commonness of euthanasia and assisted suicide. Those present three concerning directions for society that I think we need to be careful on and pay attention to going forward. All right, so let's wrap up the episode again with a little bit of lighter comments. How about we talk about Frankenstein?
Frankenstein, classic.
So yeah, I kind of like this little segment, recurring segments where we kind of talk about a recent, or I shouldn't say recent, just a movie review that we've come across, or that I've come across, and this one here I came across on Disney Plus, not a sponsor. Victor Frankenstein. So this is from this was made in 2015. And this features Daniel Radcliffe, James McAvoy, and Andrew Scott. If you're not familiar with Andrew Scott, you probably know him by face. I'm thinking his most famous role was probably as Moriarty.
People know the Moriarty from the British version of Sherlock.
Yeah, with Cumberbatch and so yeah, he's in there. And so this tells the story of Victor Frankenstein. And if you're just learning this, Frankenstein is actually the doctor, not the monster.
Oh, you find rants about that online. Some people you find somebody makes some comment about Frankenstein and they lose it because Frankenstein was not the monster's name.
Right. It's interesting because there's a point in this movie that I think Igor makes the mention that if you go down this road, people are going to remember the name Frankenstein for the monster and not for you.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting. But so this movie takes place in London, about 19th century, 1800s, and it's kind of I kind of phrase it, kind of the industrialization of society is ramping up. Science, how far can we push science is kind of at its peak, and Victor Frankenstein is obviously trying to push these boundaries.
Yeah.
And Igor is his assistant. And so Daniel Radcliffe plays Igor and James McAvoy plays Frankenstein.
And the relationship with them and how they get connected is definitely one of the more unique ways I've ever seen that done.
Yeah, it happens right at the beginning. So I don't think it's too much, but yeah. Daniel's character Igor, he basically starts off as the monster in the movie.
Yeah, like he's the hunchback and
in the circus. Yeah,
he's in the circus as basically the freak show.
He has no name.
He's a freak. He has no name, and he's the monster.
Yeah, and then an incident happens in which Frankenstein and Igor work together to save someone, and it's in that moment that Frankenstein sees the humanity in Igor and kind of brings him on as assistant and really transforms, if you will, the monster into a man.
Yeah.
I really like that.
I think there's some symbolism there in what he was doing, definitely. For
sure. Which is interesting because he recognizes the humanity in Igor, and then he's going about trying to replicate that basically by turning this monster into a man scientifically.
Yeah.
He's and then really then this so and so the movie kind of plays out this relationship between Igor and Frankenstein. It's really kind of from Igor's perspective, I think, and he kind of acts as this go-between because Andrew Scott's character is a detective looking into some peculiar going-ons, with missing animal parts and this runaway hunchback from the circus.
Yeah.
And Andrew Scott kind of represents kind of the traditional way. He's the one who believes in God, that there's something beyond simply the material.
Yeah.
Whereas Frankenstein's completely the materialist scientist.
Yeah.
Everything is materialistic, and therefore this is really the story of Frankenstein. It shows the perversion of science when it's used in a materialistic worldview. Because science is really simply a tool by which we can understand the physical world.
Yeah.
I primarily, we can hash out different nuances on that, but I think generally that's what it is. It's meant to help us explain the world we see and interact with around us, and at least as far as the physical world goes, the material world. I'll use them synonymously. The thing is, when you attach a materialistic worldview to that as well, now science becomes a tool by which you can do anything in the world, include create life, because then life is simply a material creation.
Yeah.
And as we just push science further and further, the only reason we can't create life is we just don't have the scientific knowledge to it. And so what this show is kind of wrestles with, and Igor's in the middle of it. I think he recognizes some of the arguments being made from Andrew Scott's character, but he's really connected and drawn by Frankenstein's ambition and scientific acumen.
And he's got the fascination with the science, and he admires the scientific approach and trying to do something amazing in the world of science. But he's hesitant. He's kind of
he sees some danger there too.
Yeah, he recognizes the dangerous path that it leads down.
Yeah, and so I think that's the flip side, is that so Igor is the man, or is the monster who's become a man, and I think he kind of recognizes that Frankenstein himself is becoming a monster in his pursuit.
Yeah,
there's a kind of a dehumanizing passion that he's going after. And I think there's a little quote at the beginning of the movie that has something that plays off this monster man kind of approach to things, that kind of sets the tone and the theme for the rest of the movie. And so even when the movie Frankenstein was written in the 1800s by Mary Shelley, this was exactly what was kind of they're wrestling with at the time, was this burgeoning scientific exploration and advancement. Like just think about it. It's just in the 1800s when we've shifted kind of from a more agrarian society rapidly into kind of this more industrialized urban society, and dramatic shifts that are going on there. And then you apply this kind of materialistic worldview to it, and so this kind of ends up wrestling with that, because at least I think and so there's I think immediately people see this Frankenstein as a warning of man playing God, man trying to create life.
Yeah,
and that's straight, and I think that's front and center throughout this movie and throughout the book. If you read the book, another kind of interesting take on this comes from an author, Andrew Clavin. He wrote a book called The Truth and Beauty, and he's an author himself, and well read, and he's a kind of a storyteller. I think he identifies himself as a storyteller. He picks out this kind of stuff. And so one of his comments is that he says that, to me, the greatness of the story, the horror of the story, and the threat to humanity the story portrays lies in the fact that Frankenstein has usurped the power not of God, but of women. He has made a man without a mother. His science has eliminated the principle of femininity from the creation of human life. So I find that very interesting, because you see that play out even today.
Yeah.
With this whole transgender moment that we're in, where science says you can become man or woman. There's no distinction. We have the technology to make you into this. Mm-hmm. And it destroys the important distinctions between men and women and their important roles they have in society as created by God. There's distinctions there that should not be erased, and yet science viewed from this materialistic viewpoint does not have that kind of moral framework. You just use science to mess around with the material, and that's what so much is going on now. You look at men competing in women's sports. You see how this women in particular are, and abortion I think is another issue. We don't. It's an attempt. Abortion, contraception. These were daycare. Like, I'm gonna get in trouble with all these, but anyways. Think about what's going on there. It's all trying to help women become more like men. Abortion gets rid of any problem or any advantages, quote, that men have because they don't have to worry about going through pregnancy or having kids. Contraception is very much along the same lines, though I don't put them on moral equivalence as far as the actions go. But nonetheless, it goes beyond simply saying controlling family planning or something like that. Women go on contraception who aren't how would I say it? So contraception is to prevent that pregnancy from happening, so you can be more man-like. You don't have to worry about you can go out and have sex just like a man and don't have to worry about it. Like what man worries about becoming pregnant afterwards? No one. He doesn't. So why can't women be that way too about sex? And so contraception changes that. Daycare. Well, there used to be a time when, we cherished and recognized kind of this universal trait. I shouldn't say universal. The generalized trait of this womanhood and this womanly nature to nurture and raise their children. Yeah, like that's perhaps the greatest role in society is to raise the next generation. Yeah, and yet we try to. The state says no, we'll look after that for you with cheap daycare. All why? To get them into the workforce because that's what men do. And so there's, like I said, I got myself in all sorts of trouble with this, but this is what science has allowed us to do, is kind of erase women, erase the incredible importance that and the unique superpower that women have in creating life inside them and raising the next generation of humanity. Yeah. We want to get rid of that so they become more man-like, and we do science to do and use that. And so Frankenstein in many ways is kind of that,
taking it to the extreme but
example
that's
of
kind
that.
of what it's doing.
And even Frankenstein himself in the book, and there's a moment at the end of the movie, you see it as well, that he questions whether or not he succeeded. And whether or not he should have gone down this path at all. Yeah. But yeah, so there's a wide range. And so I think it's and just from a technical standpoint, it's well done. I think it's really watchable. It's disturbing.
For sure.
It's horror, I guess. I think I would classify it. Like, why not?
Yeah, they kind of classify it that way. I
don't know what, like, oh yeah. It's not for the squeamish.
No. Yeah. But don't go into it thinking
it's not a slasher.
No, it's not a slasher. It's not a gory mess. But it is unsettling.
Yeah, he's assembling creatures with other parts. Yeah, and so yeah, there is that element of horror in it, but horror is a much broader category than say slasher or gore or something like that. Yeah, but yeah, it's competently acted, competently shot, and perhaps if you're already a kind of a fan of the whole notion of Frankenstein and then in that movie. And I think it really does a good job of not dismissing that tension that I think plays out in the book between whether or not this is a good or not, or right. Of whether or not we can create life. Should we create life? What does that do to man, to the monster? So yeah, there's lots to be interested in and to enjoy in this movie. Even despite some of the disturbing parts, there's lots of good thought material in there. Mm-hmm. So yeah, if you got 2 hours and you don't mind a little bit of a horror movie, Victor Frankenstein is perhaps one that you might want to check out. All right, with that, we've come to the end. Thank you for coming along with us as always. We appreciate it. Leave a comment if something has sparked your interest and you want to interact with us. We're always looking for your feedback. And so, but with that, thank you as always for joining us. My name is Brian Constantine.
And I'm Michael Rowland.
And this has been Pendergast Talk Radio.